Welcome to Live with Friends. My name is Samuel Aguilar, Sam Aguilar. I'm the author of The White Rose. And today we have my friend Euno. If you know, you know. And so, a really good friend of mine, a fraternity brother. And I'll let him introduce himself and we'll go ahead and get started.
Hello, everybody. My name is Euno, or you know. Uh, I do YouTube. I am a social media influencer as well as your daily 9 to 5er. Okay. Me and Sam been friends since 2014. Not only is my fraternity brother, but he is a really, really great person. Somebody that I've admire would be a funny word to say, but somebody that but somebody that I've seen grow expeditiously. And this book is a start of a great way of Sam to express himself as well as give you guys insight of him. Whether you know him or have known him, this is his, I call it a new chapter. So I'm very excited to talk to him today.
So, thank you so much. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So I'm taking over. It's all about no kidding, not about me. Duh. Anyway, so we're going to talk about his book, The White Rose. Now, I'll be completely honest. I have not read this book. However, the reason why I've not read it because I wanted to hear parts of the perspective of Sam's mental before I decided to actually dive into this book. However, I can tell just off of the little bits and pieces he has told me that this is a very deep dive into just the concept of growth. And so I have a couple questions. And one of them that I wanted to get into that we spoke on was the characters. Specifically, that only one of them has a gender, which is Alice. Obviously, she's a woman. But I was curious when we had this conversation that you said that you put her in a garden with 3 men. For what?
Yeah, so it's I knew this question was coming. The way I wrote the story was very weird for me, and so I'll give you kind of my thought process. The entire book is based off of the Alice in Wonderland motif, which to me signifies growing into adulthood, growing into responsibility, and how sometimes the world just doesn't make sense, or people are pretending in a way that maybe you're not prepared to do or haven't quite learned how to do yet. And so the Alice character, me, and just in literature and the movies, has always been very special. And I see her as that symbol of growth. And so now I'm not a woman. I know a lot of women, but I can't possibly have that perspective or share that perspective. Even with all the therapy and with all the empathy in the world, that's just not my reality. Probably never will be.
Right.
And so, yeah, I thought long and hard about taking her out and just kind of specifically speaking to the male experience, to the male going through dependency experience. But to answer your question, the reason that I wanted to have her in there is because in me and personally, just in my own personal experience,
Mm.
my machismo and my, just kind of being a womanizer, trying to get as many girls and, trying to get attention from women in adulthood, both in, high profile government settings, corporate America, even the nonprofit space. A lot of that shaped kind of the mental jungle that I write about in the book. And so eventually
Okay.
it does become a garden, a really cool place where all the characters go and they hang out. But I wanted to speak to how true, women were in my experience. And so later in the book, all of the characters are kind of validated or they have some sort of redemptive moment or shared experience with the Alice character. But it was very difficult and hopefully not too tone deaf to have her be introduced into the garden and as kind of the object of desire of the main character, Atlin. She is we can say, kind of a younger sister role to JK, who's the owner of the garden. And then Monster Me, who's one of the just kind of big brute character, wants nothing to do with her. And so they kind of go through their own intertwined, very personal journeys. But that was a lot of what I had to go through to kind of find myself and to recover and to grow.
So, because the concept of you saying your machismo-ness, right? Okay, so because men are competitive, it's a dog eat dog world out here. These three specific men, what are their intentions? Is it solely just for Alice's attention, Alice's, her womanhood, the essence of a woman, or was there more concept into it when you wrote that out? Because a garden is supposed to be a calm place, a sanctuary in a way, even back to biblical spaces where, the Garden of Eden. Do you think that in your lifespan that the garden was the right place to put her in?
Mhm. Yes, and so I can't reveal. I would love for people to read the book, and so I
Which
honestly
I need to, by the way, including myself. Okay.
no, and I want it to be a movie someday. Honestly, that's kind of where I'm going with all of this giant project. But what I can say is, short answer, yes. And the reason why is so Atlan, who represents kind of my alter ego, literally my ego, finds himself in a like really dark jungle of his own mind
Mm,
because of a wild night out doing drugs with a bartender named Alice. And so that's actually partially a true story from my life that I changed a few details around.
mhm,
And so the the bartender Alice is different than the Alice character who is now in this mindscape garden. But keep in mind that he starts off lost in the jungle. And so the book is actually it's a bit confusing because it's written in a non-linear timeline. And so you get bits and pieces of who Atlan becomes while he's still becoming that future self. And you get bits and pieces of kind of where Alice has been and where she's going while she doesn't even know like what she's doing in the garden in the first place. And so I'll kind of leave it at that. I'll leave a little bit of mystery in there, but I will say that Alice is one of the only characters that is extremely comfortable and almost nonchalant in the garden. She's not by no means like trapped there or feels like she is the object of desire. At some point, she becomes the ruler of the garden, and everybody kind of just follows her lead. And so it was a lot of fun to just kind of play around with the character, and I hope I did so in a responsible fashion. And if I didn't, I would love just to have an open, honest dialogue with anybody who thinks that I didn't do the Alice character justice, or maybe there's uncoded or unhealed sort of machismo going on there. I love those sort of conversations, and anything I can learn more about myself, especially from writing that I've already put out into the world and can't really take back. I would love those learning opportunities.
absolutely. You being a Latino man, was there anything of your cultural background that inspired the book as well?
Yeah, actually, a great bit. All of it, almost. I think every chapter is kind of my identity put into hopefully a learning process that can help other people, other addicts. And so I'll start, but just by saying in the first chapter, I took a very deeply personal thing that I had written probably about 4 or 5 years ago, something that described my journey into manhood. And so basically, one summer, I went back to Mexico. I was born in Acapulco, Mexico. And so I was pretty sure I was 17 or 18 years old. I went back there, and that was the first time that I used my bilingual identity or like my language skills, right? Speaking English and Spanish. And I made so many friends that summer. A lot of them were like tourists from out of town, from all parts of the world in bikinis. It was great. I loved it. And then at the
Yes.
same time, I was just being honest. But at the same time, I was playing with my cousins. I was at the auto shop with the old abuelos, the old tios. And so I really felt kind of interconnected in a way that other people didn't have because they didn't have those language skills. And then just to continue on that identity piece, I ended up going to school at the University of Georgia, go dogs. And I added one more layer of kind of cultural identity with SEC football and just kind of the entire Southern collegiate experience. I'm excuse me. I'm a member of a very small group of Latinos and Latinas who have gotten to work at the congressional level as lobbyists and like interacting with lawmakers. I'm a brother of Lambda Theta Phi, Latin Fraternity Incorporated. I'm a dog owner. I'm a gardener. I'm a cook. There's like all these little cultures, all these little languages that I've gotten either born into or have gotten to learn about to the point where I feel very comfortable having that identity. And so that's what the book is. I don't touch on all of those. I wish I could. It would have made for a very confusing book, but I touch on the ones that are most important to my recovery process and who I am as a person today.
Speaking of person you are today, so from Miami, you've been to Miami a lot of times. Um, in regards to you understanding your addiction, and because I'm in a city that the party life is just extravagant. Everybody comes here to, either go on vacation, enjoy the beaches, the strip clubs, just to get their vices on. Because the first time I met you was no, it wasn't. Was the first time I met you in Miami? No, it wasn't. We've been first of all, I don't remember half the time. Tell me when you were down here, what was that experience for you?
Yeah, so I'll share I'll share kind of the before and after. Well, I'll share the during and the after. Um, when I was in Miami a few times in my active addiction, I don't know if I've mentioned it on this recording specifically, but I'm a cocaine addict. That's what the book is about. I go through a daily process of just making sure I'm in the right state of mind to not do drugs. That's like my main goal every single day. But when I was in active addiction, it was something that I was doing daily, if not hourly. And Miami was, in a weird way, almost my safe haven for the hell that I was living through. And so when I was at home, I'll explain that. I'll
Yeah,
explain that.
because I'm like, huh, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
Okay, tell me
No,
something.
and it was so here's the thing. When I was at home, I had work, I had responsibilities, I had friends that I had to pretend that I was okay around. When I was with my family, obviously there's a very different mask that I was wearing. Even when I would travel for work to other cities like DC, Austin, Houston, just other cities, other parts of the world, there was always something tying me back down to there's a level of responsibility or there's something that I had to do. For whatever reason, it was crazy. Like after 2 a.m. nights in Atlanta, and then anytime I touched down in Miami, that my brain switched into, well, everything goes here. Anything and everything goes.
Yep.
And at the time, I had, I don't say this to brag, but like resources were pretty much, I had the resources to afford a really, really great time. And so staying in very, very posh hotels and like expense accounts that covered meals and things while I was working or pretending to work sometimes, I let myself go to new heights. And so Miami just happened to be the place where that happened. And if you've been there before, there's Lambos on the streets, everybody's in a bikini.
Hmm.
You don't know what's real, what's not. Talking about body parts, but also just there's a lot of marketing. There's a lot of just really cool, flashy things, clubs. So it's a whole lifestyle, right? Most people know
Right.
the whole Miami Vice experience. And so in my head, I kind of, when that flip switched, it was fair game for me just to let myself go in any way that I wanted. And so I actually don't have very many memories where I remember like laughing with friends or having a great night with, just a bottle of wine or like going for a stroll on the beach. No, it's chaos. It's chaos. It's like just like barely remembering, barely making flights to go back home. And so that was the during. And I think, a lot of people can do that and it's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with that, right? Kind of just a quick spring break weekend.
Right.
We all need that. There's nothing wrong with that. But for me, that mentality really took over, and it infected the rest of my life. And so now, going back to Miami today, I have number one a lot less money. So a lot of the things I was doing, it doesn't make
Can't do
sense
that anymore.
to
Mm-mm.
do. Yeah. But number two, I've noticed how much more calm my presence is there. And so, just to give you an example, the last time I was in Miami was about fall last year, and I went for a 2 mile walk in the Alapata neighborhood. I
Mm-hmm.
made a few Cuban friends at a cafeteria, like cafetera, and then I talked to a homeless dude, and I just talked to him about kind of how he lives his day just because I could. I had some really good ideas. I was actually writing this book at the time, so I had some really good ideas about that. Then I ended up just visiting an orchid garden that's down there. Got to walk around, just study a really rare and weird plant. The orchid, super strange. I'm pretty sure they're aliens, but to me, that was so interesting. And I remember all of it. I remember not needing or not craving attention from women or not having to be the fastest, looking for somebody to race in a sports car or thinking about what club I was going to that night. And I still hung out with friends, but I think we just watched the Premier League game. And that was it. And I say that with that emphasis because, like, that was it, but really it was so fulfilling to my heart and to it just confirmed that I was becoming the type of person that I wanted to become and that I wasn't really continuing in those old patterns. Excuse me, those old patterns that I know where those lead me. So
When you started to slow down from those vices, you started to open your mind to not needing those things, where did that originally start for you?
um rehab, honestly, first, to be
Hey,
honest.
listen, the start, period.
Yeah.
Start.
And I'll be honest, and I write about it in the book. It did not click the first time. So the first time I went to rehab, my family actually still didn't know. I managed to get like professional help without having to admit it to them really. Um, and so the big turning point there was just that I accepted that I asked for help and then that I accepted it.
Accepted it.
I wish I would have paid more attention, could have saved myself a lot of time, a lot of money, but I didn't, and I'm sure you may hear a lot of those stories, right? Folks are in and out of rehab and like maybe
Yeah,
it fixes, maybe it doesn't. And I'm not 100% sure that I'm done with rehab, right? That's why I live my life the way that I do, is to make sure that that's hopefully not even a possibility. But to say that I'm cured or that I love to say that I'm an addict in recovery, and I will say that until the day that I die because I know how easy it is to slip back.
back into it.
And so, yeah, so I think that was the first turning point. And then when I really started internalizing everything that I was learning, that I had learned, and it's really difficult for me to share, but I need to start doing it. I had mentors that sat me down and they told me, there was two of them. And so they said, like, we realize this, we hope that you do, but you are acting in a way that like you are literally committing suicidal behaviors. And this is when fentanyl was really, in like the fentanyl pandemic was at its height. So it was in a lot of drugs. I go to recovery meetings, and it seemed like almost every month there was somebody's brother or sister would come in and say, "Hey, they're not with us anymore." There used to be a lot of laughter in those rooms about recovery, and they really quickly turned very somber. And so a lot of people were worried for me. I was still relapsing from like every 2 weeks to every month, but it was almost like clockwork. Like I knew
Hmm.
kind of how far I could go before falling backwards. And yeah, when they sat me down and they told me that, it didn't sound right at first. I was like, I'm not. I'm not suicidal. I love myself. I have a huge
Right.
ego.
Okay.
I'm that's not me. And then when we really broke it down, it was like, okay, why do I continue to make these decisions that I know could possibly lead me to and will are making the statistical like percentage higher that I will die doing drugs or I will die because of my actions on drugs, like getting behind the wheel of a car, getting into a dumb fight, try like stealing things to get money to go get drugs, and then overdosing, right? And so when they broke it down to me that way, and they almost like playfully threatened me, but they said, if you care so much, like it's either stop and like fully commit to stopping and learning how to fully commit to stopping, or just go out there and do all the drugs that you want. And to me, when it was presented, like I'm competitive as hell, and so when they presented it to me that way, I got
You're
so
like,
much.
I'm gonna go do it. Yes, you want to play? I'm gone. All right,
It's
fuck it,
like, all
let's
right,
go.
all right,
But yeah, until you realize,
yeah,
hey, stupid, you do if you
right.
want to, but you wake up tomorrow, like, yeah, yeah, that would just look like a wake up call. Like, yeah, I mean, you should stop before I really actually do it for real. Because, listen, oof. Well, I'm glad you didn't try to fight on it because maybe that we were talking today. You did.
Yeah, I'm
Ooh.
glad too. And honestly, it was difficult. Conversations like that were far and few in between. Really, what helped out a lot more was like conversations with you, man, on Instagram. I know like we don't talk a lot face to face. I haven't seen you down in Miami. When you're in Atlanta, you don't hit me up. It's cool. But
Here you go with that.
no, it's laughter with friends and honestly just letting people know, even if I hadn't fully shared what was going on in our conversations, in the way we hang out and like love each other, I knew that I was loved and I knew that people wanted me around, even with all the messed up things that I had did and done and continue to do, honestly. Even with all of that, I knew that I had a great support system and it almost became like a team. I didn't want to let my team down and I had to do better for my team. So thank you.
I mean, you start crying and shit. Listen, I appreciate you so much. All right, we're gonna get into some a little. I wouldn't call it messy, but we know how politicking is in this world. So me and you had a conversation a couple of days ago about immigration and the how what they call the Black and Brown Coalition. I'm only doing that because I see a lot of division between Black people across the board, diaspora, even Caribbean, and the Latino community. We saw that in the beginning with Donald Trump immigration policies, the ICE raids. You saw California was a turmoil, and now to the point where he's now attacking certain cities. I'm not gonna go into the red and blue part of it because at this point, um, we can talk about it all day. Um, just to ask the question because people probably don't know this, but you identify as Democrat or Republican.
Oh man, that's a great question. So I'm bipartisan. I besides being an author, I'm a political consultant, and I work with people on both sides of the aisle, so long as they are actually wanting to help communities and not just themselves.
Right.
But to answer your question specifically, I about 10 years ago identified as a Republican. 5 years ago, I identified much less as a Republican, and I'll say present day. Yeah, oh my God, I'm gonna hate admitting this, but I think I'm a Democrat. I think I've what I've seen happen to the conservative movement into the Republican Party because of the far right and because of President Trump. It almost leaves no space for just common sense conservatives in the Republican Party anymore.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. But great question, you got me.
No, no. I asked this because I'm someone that identifies as Democrat, but I've started to lean more right. I cannot say I'm a Republican though, because lo and behold, I think people across the board, whether you are a Democrat or Republican, you people do primarily have conservative values based off of what the American dream is supposed to be.
Mhm.
But when it comes to black people in the diaspora and the Latino community of the diaspora, we're starting to see a divide. I think that started back during the George Floyd era. Now we're gonna get deep into. I'm gonna get a little deep into it. I'm not a politicking type of person, but I'm gonna tell the things that I have seen into what's going on now, 2025. California was the first place I kind of was like tripping out about because Cali is primarily a Latino state. And during those ICE raids, I kind of was on the fence because you know I don't think it's right the way he's going about it. At the same time, it's just like, you know, two things be true at the same time, and a lot of people don't want to hear that. On the sake of, I don't like the fact that if someone did come over the border illegally, right, but they've been here 10 plus years, what's the point of you sending them back? That most people concept is the other concept is when they come over legally, period, you need to go back to your country. And it's just like, okay, so where the odds at meet at? So because I know you mentioned that part of the book does get into some form of immigration talk, what is your stance on it as a Latino man?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'll contextualize it a little bit, just kind of with my understanding of history. And so I think the Black Civil Rights Movement, which originated in the South, in states like Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, and the original leaders and like thought leaders and leaders of action um, came from the South. They came from the directly impacted communities. Like they were living through the worst of the worst as history recorded it. And that's where those leaders arose from and came from and stepped into their leadership roles and faced all the friction that eventually turned them into heroes. So like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, John Lewis, so many people we could
So many
name.
people, Malcolm X,
Yeah.
Rosa Parks.
And what I see, I'll tell you the similarities and maybe some of the contrasts that I see with Latino leaders. I, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but I see Latino leaders right now being more of folks who had a pathway of privilege or a pathway of they are, and nothing, I'm not talking about social media influencers, but like they are
Right.
influencers of minds. They get on stages and they say things, like the people, they are academics first, right? And I don't want to name any names. It's a very different background than what the Black civil rights leaders had. And with the age of the internet and everything, how fast we see information spreading to new and younger generations, I think a lot of Latinos and a lot of immigrant communities, there's a complete disconnect from the older generations, and maybe even just first gen immigrants who originally got here and now their children who may be US citizens, and even their children now who are, in their youth and their infancy, but will be one of the largest voting blocs this country has ever seen in, the next decade or two. So it's just very different and it's so fragmented and so spread out. What I have seen though, and I think you were kind of touching on this a little bit, is, and I'll speak to just the Latino male identity, Latino male community, is not a lack of solidarity, but a lack of knowing how to approach or how to show up. And so I remember when the Black Lives Matter protests were going on here in Atlanta. I lived in Buckhead, which is kind of more central, more downtown.
I'm gonna have to pause on
Um,
this. I use the bathroom.
yep,
All right, so let's take a break. We'll come
yep,
back on.
we'll pause. Yeah.
So I'm like trying to hold it to the point of like where I beat up. All right, so let's get into. All right, so let's get into. I guess I want to call the last topic before we get into closing. Because I know you are an immigrant, right? And I always find that topic like touchy, but I've always wanted to kind of give somebody a point and see if it correlates, right? So I was obviously born in America, born in Miami, Florida. But even in the black community, we get othered. For example, even though I was born and raised in the hood, is Miami Gardens. If people hear like you from the hood, Miami Gardens is the hood, yes. But I wasn't raised on hood culture. Like, the music, obviously, yes, rap music, hip hop, how the background of that. But like in a day to day in a residential neighborhood, like I didn't see the gun violence. I didn't see people breaking into people's houses. My family is very college educated. My mother has a bachelor's and a master's. My dad did not go to college. He almost was a professional baseball player. I got cousins, my sisters, college educated. So of course, going to a um prestige, not the right word, so please give me a second. I went to a Montessori school. I don't even know what those are. Do you know what that is?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was in the Montessori program at Joella C. Good, which is in Hialeah, Miami Lakes. So of course, when I was growing up, obviously, like my ebonics was not something I played into in school. That was something we did, on the side, with our friends, what we call in the black community. Uh, I would say that's not slick rapping. It's called. Look at me not being on my p's and q's.
Coach?
Code switching. So I can sound like a college kid. I'm talking in school, but then I'm a girl. This, all that with my friends. But when we're told that we're talking too proper or we're speaking, the English dialect, we're called Oreos. I ain't got see, I ain't got. The only person in my family that was white was my great grandfather, but he was biracial. So yeah, you got a little whitey. We all do because slavery, of course, duh. But imagine you being amongst your people and they saying you're not black enough. So for you being a Latino, you know, you wasn't born in America, right? You're an immigrant, duh. You stupid bitch. He was not born in America, duh. Um, were you the only person in your family that spoke English once you learned the language?
So I was the first. It's a little lambda joke there. I was the first English speaker in like person who comprehended English in my family, and I was like 6 years old, and one I write about it a little bit in the book, but not only was I learning at school a new language and learning it in my community with my neighbors and other kids in the neighborhood, but I very quickly became almost the representative and the ambassador of my household. And by that, I mean going with my mom to translate at the bank. I remember sitting through a very technical conversation about housing one time. I can't remember if it was like an apartment complex or what it was, but I had to translate words that I didn't even know what they meant. And so, in doing that, number one is very difficult. Number two, it's just not something that I think a child should be involved in, but it is a lived reality for so many first generation immigrants. And I know that because I met a lot of them in later on in life, and we kind of share this similar experience. But one thing that stuck out to me, and to some it was traumatic, to some it was funny. Everybody goes through and processes it differently. But I started to notice and observe how dismissive, rude, and mean people were, even when they spoke to me, when they were really speaking to my mom, to my dad, or to whoever I was translating for at the time. And so I totally get the code switching, and I've seen a lot of that too, especially with my black friends. But for me, it was almost like a complete shift in the tone of respect that people had when they spoke to my family. That it stuck out, and I wanted to make sure that no other child and like no other family had to feel that way because they didn't speak English or because they were poor or because of what neighborhood they came from. And honestly, that's why I entered government affairs. That's why I started my career in politics. And eventually, a lot of that trauma, like I'll call it what it is, and not just from childhood, but it built up over the years. A lot of that trauma is what led me to drug use and just putting so much pressure on myself, thinking that I could change the world for the better, which I still think that I can, but I'm just a lot more relaxed about it now. And so, yeah, it was that I call it just translating disrespect, but I had to find a way to make sure that my family and my loved ones didn't receive what I was seeing other people give them.
Um, to piggyback, and I know this might sound like a political question because we are talking about immigration. Um, because you referenced the fact that you felt like you were disrespecting your parents because they didn't speak English. How do you feel about Latinos who come to this country but do not want to learn English? I'm only asking that again. We're not getting too political because now we're seeing a lot of stuff going on in the political spaces where a lot of people are, losing jobs for not speaking English. We got people who feel like because America is supposed to be a English based country, but like living in Miami, a lot of jobs are not accessible if you do not speak Spanish. A lot of jobs literally say in the job description must be bilingual. So you having to learn the language to be able to help your family out. How do you feel about Latinos who don't want to learn the language because they feel like because they always speak Spanish, that's fine across the board? If you want to answer it, you can. You don't have to. I just feel like that's something we can have dialogue about.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll give you two answers, and the first is a little playful, but I think it's 100% true. Is like my opinion doesn't mean shit. Like who am I to, So I do have like an opinion on it, but at the end of the day, I think people do whatever they do because of the reasons that they choose and like what is in their best interest. And so if there's a family that's just working, 40, 60, 80 hours a week to survive and they don't need to learn English and their priority is like just putting food on the table, having a roof over their heads, who am I to judge? And
Hmm.
if there's, I don't know, some rich college student that comes here and just has a whole bunch of Latino friends that speak Spanish to them and they're, snobby or whatever, and they don't want to learn English, that's fine too. I'm kind of jealous of their life, to be honest. But
Okay, they
for
got
me,
money. Okay.
right, I'm like, hey, I will speak in Spanish if it means I'm getting paid. But no, like jokes aside, I don't think my opinion all that matters. And then when it comes, what I do think is important though, is when it comes down to what the government is saying, like when certain like rules are put in place. So to give you an example, in 2016, I was a part of a group of organizations, and I helped lead an effort to stop Georgia Republican Senate constitutional amendment that would require English to be the only language used in the entire like state government of Georgia. And so I believe that included basically like the state DMV, driver's license exam. Don't quote me on that. It's a few years ago, but
Okay.
basically we had a lot of the business community, a lot of sort of labor groups and associations come out. And even if they didn't publicly say that they were against it, they were a huge part of the behind the scenes working that ultimately that stopped that legislation from moving forward. And so I've seen coalitions be built behind closed doors with a lot of corporate dollars, with a lot of chamber money, and at the end of the day, I feel very comfortable saying this publicly, but I think at the end of the day, corporate America and sort of corporate interest have a huge role to play in our politics and in our government. And so, yeah, when it comes to government intervention and language and just kind of dictating, in particular, what jobs are available and things like that, I think culture and the economy is always going to be driving those decisions. And so any efforts to roll that back, I think, will very quickly be met with a reality that even President Trump understands, and that's money.
With all evil channels. Because I know we can talk about that forever. Um, where do you think me and you, as just the regular person, because a lot of the stuff that's happening in this country specifically does affect people like you, who are Latino, people like me who are black, and we're starting to kind of see this divide amongst our communities, especially just because certain things are happening where it's kind of like, well, that ain't got to do with me, so they can handle it type shit. And I know we talked about George Floyd a little bit, where Black Lives Matter movement. I have my own feelings about that, and I'll get into in this conversation. And you just know solidarity, the Latino community in regards to their thoughts and opinions of what's going on in immigration. Where do us come back together? It's not we're trying to fight the system, in a way where like we're trying to take down the man, but how do we like put back that hey, it is a us thing, it is a what they call the Black and Brown coalition? Like how do we put that back into the universe where everybody can kind of agree on it
Mhm.
as people?
Yeah. That's a great question. That's a if no, that's a really, really good question. And again, I can only just speak to my opinion, but I think that getting off the internet, and I mean by that I mean less social media posts that share kind of like, well, this is where I stand on what happened this week, and more conversations like this. Pick up the phone, call a friend, talk through some of like the death of Charlie Kirk this week brought out a lot of emotions, a lot of opinions, a lot of just public statements, and I really like it saddens me is really what it does. But when I go online and I see like some very, very dear friends of mine, no matter what their opinion was, I just think, wow, you probably like could have just called me. We could have had a great laugh, and you probably would not have thought about this like any longer. And so, to me, I don't know. I think America has really lost out on a lot of connection, discussion, and cultivation of true friendship because of what we see online, because of what is now normalized to post on social media, and honestly, because
Mhm.
some of us have to be because of corporate America, because of our jobs, because of the organizations that we lead and that we stand for. And so that's something that I really struggled with, especially in how it balanced with my sobriety was, okay, how do I effectively communicate my opinion, and when is it most important for my opinion to matter? And having a job in government and in public affairs and policy where like I don't say this to brag, but my opinion sometimes does matter more than the average person off the street or like than my friends because of the people that I have access to. And so I always carry that responsibility with me in the government affairs space, is to say, okay, well, if I'm going to speak my mind and I'm going to speak my opinion at the same time, I need to have a devil's advocate sort of rebuttal to what I'm saying to make sure that I fully thought this out. And I don't think enough of us are doing that. And then one way that I do, you didn't ask, but one way that I do it is I annoy the shit out of my friends, and they know that they can annoy the shit out of me too. And so we'll call. I'll say, here's what I'm thinking. Like I have a friend who's like really high up in corporate America, like traveling to South America almost on a weekly basis, and we had a whole conversation on God and how people are using God to like demean others at 7 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. I'm talking like 4 or 5 minute voice notes. I'm like, he doesn't have time for that shit, but we do it because it makes us better. It makes us better commentators. It makes us better debaters. And at the end of the day, even we weren't in disagreement, but we learned a little bit more about maybe a perspective that I had that he hasn't seen living in Cherokee County, Georgia. And then I definitely learned a different perspective from what he's going through at those sort of higher levels of company. And yeah.
I'm not gonna get too into it because you brought up Charlie Kirk. I didn't know if you want to talk about it. And we don't get that deep into it, but you said a couple things I wanted to touch on. Number one, that situation in itself is just, but I saw a lot of vision amongst people I follow on social media, especially friends, not close friends, mind you. My close friends don't get into shit like that, but people I follow that do like either talk about it to a point or like just make commentary. And like I said, I think the country has lost its ability to trust God. I feel like because again, a lot of people, which is why it was funny that we had when we talked about we only touched briefly on about you saying that you're leaning more towards Democrats now than you were when you were Republican. I told you that I'm leaning more right because of what I've seen within the Democrat Party. Um, but when people were ecstatic about Charlie, I just did not understand where the I'm sorry. My language, I don't know where the fuck people lost their head at. It was just like, okay, yeah, he said a lot of things about black people. Yeah, he's disparaged the LGBTQ community. That's another person another day, and I do Charlie Kirk. He talked about a lot of things that of course the first person be like, man, fuck Charlie Kirk, the fuck shit he stand for. But at the end of the day, that was still a father, that was still a husband, and at the end of the day, for what Charlie Kirk was able to do in the years that he was going to these college campuses and doing these conversations was just prove me wrong. And you can't even have your own personal opinion and speak your mind because in the back of your mind, you have to worry about someone, pew pewing you and take you out. Like, that's not the world we're supposed to live in. And it's just like, on the notes on this, I said, y'all out of tune with God. Because if you don't like somebody, you don't be happy that they died. Like, I just was not understanding the concept of that mess. And I'm just like, you know, that cuts out a political part of it is just we're losing humanity, and I just did not understand the aspect of people saying that the man died. Like that shit was crazy to me. Um, but I agree with you that these are the time where we need to um call each other on the phone and just talk. To wrap this up, because we learned a lot about each other in the past 30-40 minutes. Um, where do you want this book to go? Where do you see Sam Aguilar, not just the person, but now the author, the writer? Because to write a book, that takes a lot of time and energy, and because this book is like a new version of the you now, the recovering addicts, as you said, the man of God, the you know person of politics. I don't know how you want to call that, but a new Sam. So where do we expect you to go from here?
So thanks. It was all very, very flattering. Honestly, I want to help other young men in crisis. And I mean people, but I say young men because that's an experience I've thoroughly explored, investigated, and lived through. And what I see when I look at the world right now is a, a societal reckoning. Honestly, I think whether it's economics, whether it's politics, whether it is social media, there are a lot of spaces that are creating winners and losers. And I've been a winner and I've been a loser. I've thought about winning differently than I've thought about losing. And honestly, I have a giant network of people because of the jobs that I've had and all of the cultures that I feel that I can communicate with, that this is so broad, and young men, unfortunately, as we've seen in the 90s with, the crack epidemic, a lot of poverty, as we saw with, even just STD rates and things like that, gang violence. There is a certain type of violence and a certain type of societal detriment that young men can cause because of the amount of just energy and confidence and bravado that we have. And like, as you had mentioned when we started, it's so easy for us to be competitive. And when you're a competitive person and you feel like you're just losing, you lose at work, you lose, don't get the girl that you want, don't get the job that you want, whatever, it can really start to create a mental image of yourself, and also sort of a societal meanness in us. And I know so deeply personal because I've been there before, and I mentor a lot of young men who, even though they have a lot of great opportunities ahead of them, are so quick to make rash decisions and judgments that will harm them, whether it's drugs, whether it's something as simple as getting behind the wheel of a car when you
Hmm.
shouldn't. And I want to save the world, as I've said a few. Well, thank you so much for coming on live with friends. Even though this one wasn't live, I really, really wanted the opportunity to share this time with you. What you saw back then and what you see now, I think your testimony, whether you believe it or not, but the transformation that I've gone through, I think is one that you understand more than most. So I appreciate your friendship. Can't wait to be back down in Miami. Can't wait to see you in Atlanta or wherever else we may meet again in person. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me today. And then also wanted to give you space to say goodbye, but also share anything cool that you're working on, how folks can follow your work and see what you're all about.
Well, first of all, I believe you absolutely. This conversation, let alone have we not had any real deep conversations to this point, but this conversation, just even quote unquote interview you, was an opportunity to learn you better. And I'm so proud of you, Sam. Like, you really have changed. Um, and like, you were a bad person when we first met, but the growth of what you learned to become now, it's well worth sharing. In that book is going to open so many doors and so many minds to, just the conversation of being honest and open. But if you guys want to find me, you can find me on Instagram. My name is Unoric. I know you could probably spell it, but it's right there on the screen. I also am working on my YouTube channel. You can go check it on YouTube at Euno, EUNO TV. And actually, this episode of the, what do you call it? Talking with Friends. This is also
Live.
live. Oh, Talking with Friends live. Okay, period. Talking with Friends live will also be on episode of the podcast. Podcast is called Real Talk with Yuno. That will be it's on Spotify and Apple Music. So this episode actually will be on the podcast. So that'll give Sam some more listeners, 'cause I think his message and story should be broadcasted. So you'll see those, and I'm so grateful you allowed me to interview you, Sam. So it really was a great honor.
Yeah, awesome. Well, take care.
Someone once told me the
We'll see you
grass
again.
is much greener on the other side.